Jay Sano without intro music. Jay Sano with intro music. Intro music remix. Jay Sano 19, Jay Sano 19. Jay Sano 19, Jay Sano 19. Hello everybody and welcome back. It is Jeff again and I'm here on the Mindcrack server. I'm off in that little area where I had gone to do some resource gathering. I decided to come back because I wanted to do some caving. And I wanted to talk to you guys about kind of a mix between pet peeves and proper business. I guess that would be the way that I would put this. So, let me tell you. One of my biggest pet peeves is companies who go out of their way to pretend things are so much better than they are when in reality they're horrible. Now, I know that sounds kind of funny because pretty much every company does that. Anybody who's selling a product of any type tries to sit there and pretend that their stuff is, you know, the bee's knees of everything because they want to sell their product. Of course, I understand the concept and how that stuff works. I get it that everybody's going to make advertisements that they're better than their competitors in every way, shape, or form. If you didn't try to portray that, you would fail as a company. I get that part of it. But what I'm more talking about is when you're dealing with, like, food or drinks or something like that, like Coke versus Pepsi. Which one is better, Coke or Pepsi? It really comes down to the opinion of the person who's going, wow, oh my god, oh my goodness. It really comes down to the opinion of the person, who's going to be partaking in the beverage. So if I drink Coke and I say that I like Coke better, then I personally like Coke better. Somebody else next to me is going to drink Pepsi and say that they like Pepsi better. That's fine. People are going to sit there, they're going to form their own opinions about it. You know, they're going to have this, you know, the blind taste test. They do the blind taste test thing all the time on which one's better, Coke or Pepsi. Like, those are great. What I'm more talking about is, this guy is not going to be fun. What I'm more talking about is there's certain companies out there who get an unfair advantage in the selling of their product based on many different factors, especially those factors of governmental regulation. Government regulation. The governmental can come in too, but I'm more talking about government regulation in this particular case. So, for instance, I'm a nurse. I work at a hospital. I work with I work with health records. I have to make sure I do due diligence and documentation to make sure everything that's done for the patient is documented appropriately. I have to make sure I continue to do my work as a nurse and not let documentation get in the way, which, let me tell you, is very hard in the electronic health record documentation age. But here's the thing. The government came out with regulations a couple years back and basically was giving money to people saying that everybody has to be on an electronic health record by a certain time. If you do it in a certain time frame, you will actually get this big reimbursement for switching over to an electronic health record. Because, let's face it, electronic health record is the wave of the future. I have no qualms about saying that the electronic health record is a required necessity in today's healthcare day and age. I do not doubt that for 1 second. Now, the problem is, there's multiple health record companies out there that are trying to sell their product. And when I say multiple, there really is multiple. But there's only like a handful that have any, I guess you could call it clout in the industry. And it doesn't mean that they have clout because they're good. Their advertising could just be better than their competitors. They could just be cheaper than their competitors, which we all know that cheap products, especially when you're dealing with the government. Not that I'm dealing with the government, but, you know, everybody's heard the stories, you know. Government puts out contracts to get somebody to do stuff like healthcare IT, like healthcare.gov. Let's go with healthcare.gov. Pretty much the cheapest bidder won that, and it failed miserably when it first went out there. That's a lot of the way things work. And for good reason. You know, of course, companies don't want to spend all their money and wasted money on things that are going to be subpar or just as equal to somebody who was charging a lot less money. So there's big business issues, you know, here back and forth. But let me get into the pet peeve of this conversation. So pretty much, once the government went forward and required electronic healthcare records and then started making regulations based on what needs to be in the electronic health record, I think that was done, for one, in the wrong order, because now companies, it's past the expiration of the time that companies had to get their electronic health records up by to meet the initial run of meaningful use. And basically meaningful use is saying, what data do you actually collect in order for us to show that this is a meaningful, quote unquote, a meaningful medical record? Because if you just said companies and hospitals and things like that have to get an electronic medical record, what would that entail? Anybody could just go out there and be like, look, I put this stuff in an Excel database. It's an electronic health record now because it's in an Excel database. That was theoretically possible. Like, you could do that. It's an electronic health record. But they made the meaningful use criteria, which means you have to get this particular criteria in place in order to be considered to meet meaningful use, that this is a meaningful medical record. So the concept of what they were doing made perfect sense. The problem is they came out with meaningful use criteria after the requirement that people get onto an electronic health record system, as well as the meaningful use does not have anything to do with usability of a system. Now, I know I'm talking a lot over everybody's heads, but bear with me for a minute. I mean, I'm not talking over everybody's heads for sure. There's definitely a lot of healthcare professionals that listen to my rants on a regular basis and understand exactly what I'm talking about. But for those who don't, bear with me for a second, because you're going to be blown away by this one particular issue I want to rant about right now. So, usability is a huge thing. If you can't use a system, it doesn't work. Like, let's say Minecraft. Let's say Mojang created Minecraft. It was the exact same as it is now, except for they didn't do keyboard input. They didn't do joystick input. You only had a mouse and 2 buttons, and you had to move around by scrolling your scroll wheel the entire time. The game would not have taken off nearly to the effect that it did, because people would be like, this game is so hard to control, there's no way I'm going to play this game. There's no way I can continue to play this game for hours on end and deal with trying to control my guy by just constantly scrolling through a cave and then trying to figure out however you would like switch to your different your weapons, your items, etc. Usability is a huge factor that has played no role in government regulation yet. But since they've required that everybody goes onto this electronic health record, people have been purchasing, and many people have been purchasing, the biggest name for the cheapest price. My hospital did exactly that. We got one of the bigger name health record companies out there that's one of the cheapest ones, and let me tell you, it's the cheapest for a reason. So now, let me get into why I believe that, and not just say that I'm sitting here with baseless opinions, but that they're actually based on real truth. Not only did I work nursing informatics for the last year and a half before I went back to the ICU, implementing this garbage system, and I will be straight up honest, it's a garbage system. I am now back at the bedside. I was in the emergency department for the first time in 2 years this week. I was emergency department nurse for a couple years, then I was an ICU nurse, for those who don't know, and then I went to nursing informatics, and then I went back to the ICU for the ultimate goal of becoming a flight nurse. Now, I got this special deal where I get to go back to the emergency department every scheduling period as a nurse. So every 6 weeks, I get to switch back and forth to the emergency department. So I'm in the emergency department for this 6 weeks. I haven't been there in 2 years as a working clinical bedside nurse. Let me tell you, it comes back pretty fast, though, so that's not the issue. However, one of the things that we do is we admit patients. We discharge patients. Essentially, those are the only things you do. An admission and a discharge. I can't say it's the only things you do. You do that for every patient is what I meant. You admit and discharge every patient. Even if they die, it's considered some type of either admission or discharge. They're either admitted to the morgue or discharged out completely. They call it the depart process. Some way, shape, or form, you're going to be departing the emergency department. It happens to every patient. No patient stays in the emergency department forever. So every patient will get departed. So, the depart process. You have to click a little button on the patient and fill out some paperwork. It's electronic paperwork, but you got to fill out some information to finalize the depart process. Now, I'm sitting there. I trained this system. I was the sole person. I can't say the sole person. There was 2 people that trained with me, but I had to help train them to be able to do the training. So I was the sole person at the hospital, pretty much. I was the expert for the emergency department system, which, by the way, that's a loose term in corporate lingo. Subject matter experts, or SMEs, or SMEs that they call them. It's a very loose term. It doesn't really mean they know anything, by the way, because I really didn't know anything more than the guy next to me until I learned it from, corporate people who came in, and I'm talking electronic health record company corporate people who came in and, told us exactly, what we were supposed to train, whether they knew it or not, because it's all customized, but that's besides the point. So, I go to depart my first patient. I click the button, fill out all the information, click the button that's supposed to finalize the depart, which what it does is it pops up a secondary screen where you give them a disposition, which means were they admitted, were they discharged, were they, sent to a psych facility, all these health things, blah, blah, blah. Supposed to bring up that, and then you put in the time of the exact time that they left the department. So I click the button to get to that screen, and my system locks up. So I'm like, okay, I know this system is buggy. I've not been a fan of this system ever since we implemented it. I know this is the case. I should be using my silk touch on this stuff. Whoa. Let me just Control-Alt-Delete out of this thing, go back in. So I Control-Alt-Delete out of this thing, go back in. All of a sudden, I'm no longer able to access this record because it is locked. Who's it locked by? It's locked by me. I'm the one who locked the medical record because I basically was in the middle of doing something that I did not finish that I had to leave. And I'm not even allowed to access it even though I'm the one who locked it. Okay, that's weird. Call the right people. Let's get this record unlocked. Get the record unlocked. Let's finish this process again since we ran into this random bug. So I go back in. Same thing. System locks up. Right when I hit that button to get to the final depart part of the process. Like, what is going on here? Probably this computer. This computer must be screwed up. Go to a different computer. Same thing. I can't figure it out for the life of me. And I'm the guy who troubleshot all these problems when I was working in nursing informatics, and I can't figure out what I'm doing wrong. So I asked somebody else to try it for me. Works perfectly for them. They get the patient off the board, they do it for me, take care of it. And I'm like, what is going on? That was so weird. So a couple hours later, it's now time to do the same thing to another patient. It locks up again. I'm staring at this screen. I know there's one pop-up that's up there. I'm waiting for this last pop-up, and it just doesn't come. The thing that it doesn't come, and now I can't click on anything. I try to click on anything, and it's just like, no, you can't click on anything. Like, nothing's happening when I try to click on anything else. So finally, I call the help desk, and I'm like, look, I'm lost, I do this. And coincidentally, it was really funny. I call the help desk, and the person's like, you sound really familiar. Wait, your name's really familiar. She's like, did I meet you at she said actually a different facility, but it's within our hospital conglomerate. And I was like, no, I don't work there, but... And she's like, wait, you were there on Go Live Day of all this stuff, right? And I was like, yeah. She's like, oh, you're that nursing informatics guy. Like, I was there on site, like, doing all this stuff. She's like, I remember you. So we started, like, talking for a little bit. Like, I got that personality. People like to talk to me. And they meet me, and they remember me later. Like, we had a good time that night. Talked to this woman who was our on-site help support for the, the Go Live period. And, coincidentally, I'm talking to her, so she's actually, which actually worked out extremely well, because she's like, she goes, I know you know exactly what you're doing with this system, and if you're having this problem with it, she's like, let me escalate this right now to the core team to make sure that it gets resolved, because I know you would know all the standard troubleshooting steps, because you were that guy who told other people and is, the troubleshooter for the system. So she escalates it up. I get a call not 5 minutes later from our core team. I had already gone back here. And it was just coincidentally somebody I worked with when I was on the design team for this stuff. And she's like, hey, Jeff, what's going on? I heard you're having this problem. So she's trying to walk me through this. And then she gets stumped. She can't figure it out either. And she's like, I don't know if we lost some, if your user account got corrupted or what the deal is. She's like, but this just doesn't make any sense. So I'm like, I'm good. It's not only me. I'm glad it's stumping somebody else and it's not something simple and stupid. So she goes through, she's like, give me a little bit. Let me call you back in just a little bit. I'm going to try to figure some things out. And I said, okay. There's nothing else you can do at this point. I said, okay, I'll have somebody else just basically do my work for me and put their electronically signed documentation as they did something, even though they did not do something, which is highly illegal. But what else do you do in these circumstances? And that's one of the problems with electronic health records, by the way, as well. Because, if something happened with these patients and somebody comes back later and sues us, they're going to be like, well, Susie departed the patient, Jeff. You had nothing to do with this patient. So it could cause problems in the future. I guess that's this whole cave. It's weird. So anyways, she calls me back and she's like, okay, you basically restarted your username from scratch with the preferences for this system. She's like, go ahead and try it. Nothing. Can't figure it out. I don't know what preferences exactly that they are able to reset in a user. I'm not sure, but nothing's different at all. I go on for about half the day, and then a light bulb goes off in my head. I've seen a similar problem before, right when we went live. It's not the exact same problem, but I wonder if they're related, because I started to just look at this process, and I'm like, look, it looks like this pop-up that's supposed to come is just hidden behind these other windows or something like that, and I'm not allowed to click on them because all the focus is on that top window. It won't let me click on anything else, but it feels like that pop-up is actually there because I can move my mouse. I just can't click on anything. Everything is locked up. Maybe it's just not. Oh, is this freaking Endermite? Ah, you are the bane of my existence, Mr. Endermite. Die! Die! It dawns on me. I've seen this problem before. Could this be what it is? So I call back and I'm like, hey, I don't want to say the person's name. That's why I'm just saying, hey, because that's how I talk to people. I call them up and I'm like, hey, do this. And they're like, okay, master. Obviously, that's not the way it goes. But I was like, hey, I think I figured out. I think I might understand what the problem is, but I don't know how to fix it right now. Unless I can get to a different workstation, but can you fix this? And she's like, you know what? You're right. That makes perfect sense. That's probably your problem, and I don't know how to fix it. And this is the top level tier help desk people who are supposed to be able to fix all these issues. You want to know what the problem is? I previously worked on a computer in my office when I was doing all the training and things like that for this stuff that had two monitors, dual screen monitor setup. In order to make everything efficient so I could see everything, make my screenshots, make my training documentation and all this stuff, I moved certain windows between the two different monitors. Somehow, this electronic health record system that is selling millions of copies of, making millions of dollars based on healthcare regulation, requiring people go to an electronic health record system, doesn't know how to handle when you log in from a computer that does not have dual screen monitors. If you've ever worked off of one, it still assumes that there's two monitors there, and it brings the pop-ups up to the second monitor. Now, if you don't have a second monitor on your computer, the computer's smart enough to know, if I set my Windows to say I'm working on 2 different monitors right now. And then I randomly say, turn one of these monitors off, or even a remote desktop into my system, which only utilizes 1 monitor. It puts everything on 1 monitor for you, because it's not fucking stupid. It knows that there was 2 monitors at one point that you have applications running on. If I remote desktop in and I'm only seeing it from 1 monitor now, it knows there's only 1 monitor and puts everything back to that 1 monitor. This electronic health record system does not. Is there any way to fix it? Turns out there could be this random key combination you can hit, which basically brings up the move command in a Windows, in a window on a PC, that you can then arrow it over, hopefully if you got the keyboard combination right, to get to the move command spots that you can sit there and arrow it over and bring it back onto the screen where you can see it. If you can't do that, you have to log in from a monitor, or from a workstation that has dual monitors. Otherwise, you can't do anything. This got brought up right when we went live because the doctors work off of 2 monitors on a regular basis. The nurses only ever work off of 1. We have no real need to work off of dual monitors and working on the clinical side. The doctors often will have X-ray pictures up on 1 monitor while documenting or dictating something on the other monitor. So they're kind of required to have 2 monitors. But there was 1 spot in the emergency department, 1 particular area where the doctors worked, that one of the monitors had gone bad on a computer. So the doctors had only been working off of 1 until a replacement could come in. And this problem came up for not this particular issue I'm talking about, because this one's a nursing issue, which is why it confused people, because nobody had heard of this before in the nursing realm. But for some other things, so essentially a help desk ticket got placed to the corporate electronic health record company. Like, it escalated up that far because nobody could figure it out on the standard end, and their response was something like, well, it's the way that the coding was done in the first place that paints the screen, and there's nothing we can actually do about that now. That was their response. An electronic health record company making millions and millions of dollars that is so user unfriendly and don't care if they change things to actually work because they're making money. I was literally unable to fulfill my duties as a nurse. As a nurse, physically, I was able to fulfill all my duties. I've always been. Problem is, there's not just the physical aspect of nursing and medicine. You have to have the proper documentation, or else anything you did doesn't exist. For those of you in the medical field, you understand what I'm talking about. I can do everything, and I know a lot of you are going to be sitting there and be like, well, as long as you actually did this stuff right, it's not a big deal. No, it really is. If you physically don't do, if you don't document the things that you have done, they didn't happen. If somebody else documents the things that were done, just for me to help me out by saying, okay, I'll depart that patient off the board for you and show that they got discharged at this time, it's now signed into their name that they did it, even though they didn't do it. There's a lot more to it than a lot of people would realize at first glance. And this causes problems. I was stopped dead in my tracks from finalizing my responsibilities as a nurse based on bad programming. I think I did an episode before called, I don't even want to, you know what, I probably ranted way too much in that episode, but it's pretty horrible of a concept. And as a nurse coming from the IT side, the nursing informatics side, the implementation of this specific electronic health record, I don't have anything to do with the electronic health record, so don't blame me. This is the company's creation. I can't go change their coding. I just implemented it in the hospital because that's what we happen to purchase. It is just a horrible, horrible feeling to know that I am at the whim of this company who's making so much money because of government regulations that have nothing to do with usability. And it can, in a case like healthcare, an emergency department, especially, when you're trying to get throughput to increase patient satisfaction, patient safety, the things that you're paying us for are now based on patient satisfaction, which you would find messed up. That's emergency department visits are based on patient satisfaction now from a reimbursement standpoint. That's getting into a whole different ball game here. I'm boiling with hatred and just outletting it on the Minecraft world by collecting coal and caving and such. But when you have a system based on reimbursement for like things that require things to be efficient, expedited, all of that fun stuff, and you're going to make it so difficult to use. Now, that's only one particular pet peeve on this system. I've talked about more before. I wish you guys could understand the qualms I deal with on a daily basis of how outdated this technology is for it to be a brand new system in a brand new world of electronic technology and health records. It's supposed to revolutionize the healthcare industry. Let me tell you, I'm a computer engineer. I have a master's degree in IT. I have a master's degree as well in nursing informatics. Bachelor's in nursing in the middle of there as well. That's how you can get the master's in nursing informatics. I'm embarrassed of where we're at and think that us having a full paper record in my emergency department, knowing what it's like because I did it before, is more efficient, more expedient, and more safe for patients than the system we have now. The only reason I even figured out the problem that was going on was because I kept sitting there and thinking, okay, I'm the exact same as everybody else in here. I asked them my provisioning of my user account is. Is it this? Is this what my provisioning is? And they were like, yes, it is. And I'm like, then if I'm provisioned the exact same way, what is different with me? There can't just be, they obviously have gone the corrupt route and figured out that it's not that it's a corrupt user account. What is different? What did I had to really trace back. What did I ever have different in my head? And I'm sitting here knocking on my head right now. I don't know if you guys can hear that. What did I do differently ever in my career of working with this system that any of these nurses would not have done? And therefore, what could be causing the problem? And I finally realized the dual monitors. That's the only reason it got figured out. I'm sorry, but this is a big pet peeve of mine. I am so frustrated having to work with a system like that and in a world where it's based on... They try to claim how much everything's based on patient safety and making sure there's an electronic healthcare record to ensure that patient data travels with the patient, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I understand all those concepts. It's not working in practice. Fix it. That's all there is to it. Pet peeve for the day. Shitty programming. Backed by the government. See ya.